Afternoon, thank you. First of all, I would like to take a little bit time thanking IDSA for, I think, very good hospitality and accommodation. Coming to the point, my topic is strategy of sustainable growth in Bhutan and role of regional cooperation. In terms of my paper will basically focus on a bit on a historical backdrop, 5-year plans, hydropower, the GNH economy, and the last topic being our current financial crisis that we're going through. And these are all relevant to the topic because in terms of regional cooperation, it's mainly with our neighbor and friend India. And in terms of sustainable growth, GNH economy plays its part. But I think discussion of economic development in Bhutan cannot be seen in isolation only. It has to be taken in the context of historical, political, and geopolitical factors which influence economic development and foreign policy to a certain extent. For 200 years after our 17th and 18th century of theocratic and temporal rule by the Jabdung monk body, we had 200 years of discord and I wouldn't exactly call it civil war, but there was no strong central administration. So this continued on to 1874 and 75 when Bhutan had to face the reality of the very strong and expanding British Empire coming from the Indian subcontinent. And as a result, the father of the first king, Jigme Namgyel, who was the Trongsa Penlop, he united the local lords and had to fight the British. Initial victories, but eventually the British, with their superior technology and manpower, eventually won. And Bhutan had to cede 18 of the Dwars, now called the Assam Dwars and Bengal Dwars. These territories didn't originally belong to Bhutan. It was conquered from neighboring kingdoms. But this had a huge economic impact on Bhutan because the majority of our food products were coming from these areas: rice, crops, vegetables, so on and so forth, and a lot of tax was being collected from the Dwar natives. So it had a huge impact, and the impact also was on domestic politics because for the first time Bhutan realized that we can't afford to have regional feudal lords and one king in every valley. So eventually there was consolidation, and by 1907 we had the birth of the monarchy in Bhutan with the first king, His Majesty Uge Wangchuk. And the second impact was, and the consequent of the domestic policy impact, since we had consolidation of power at the center, I think trade could expand. There was more economic development. The second impact was on a foreign policy because Bhutan was largely an isolated country, and we didn't really have to deal with a lot of the big powers. But the reality of the British Empire, which was gobbling up state after state, princely states, came to our doorstep. So I think our foreign policy had to dramatically change overnight. And I think Bhutan was a monarchy, the credit to the first king. He took up a foreign policy in which Bhutan could be there as a credible buffer state with the Russian Empire beyond Tibet in the north and the Chinese Empire close by. So in that sense, Bhutan could preserve its sovereignty and independence, and at the same time also cooperate with the giant power without having to give away too much. So that kind of laid the groundwork for our foreign policy as well. And under the first and second king, we had a lot of stable economic development. Institutions were put in place. But the major change in Bhutan's policies, I think a huge impact in our development, came in the 1940s and 50s. In 1947, India gained independence from the British. In 1958, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru visited Bhutan as the leader of a friendly country, and which helped establish deep and strong relations between the two countries. And in 1959, China invaded Tibet with its troops, and subsequently Chinese claims over Bhutanese territory, their troop movements near the border, their annexure of Bhutanese enclaves in Tibet, and statements like Tibet is the palm and Bhutan is one of the five fingers radically moved Bhutan very close to India in terms of strategic and security interests. And the events in the 1940s and 50s convinced Bhutan for once and for all that we can't afford to be isolated, we can't afford to be stuck in the past. So there was an overnight rapid transition from a semi-feudal and a medieval economy made to a modern economy. I think perhaps the fastest transition made anywhere in the world. we did in 50 years what it took countries to do in 200 to 300 years. So I think in the last 50 years there has been a rapid transition from horses to cars and planes and so on and so forth. And so as we opened up, I think we saw a lot of common interests, strategic as well as economic, with India. And we wanted to open up, and I think with traditional friendships established within Nehru and the third king, His Majesty Jimmy Dorji Wangchuk, India assisted in Bhutan's 5-year plans. The first 4 5-year plans from 1961 to 81 was majorly funded by the government of India. From the 5th till date, 30% of the plans are funded by the government of India, as still as the biggest donor. Bhutan, in the meantime, has developed its own economic capacity and it has multilateral sources of funds. Now, these plans from these 5-year plans allowed to modernize overnight. We had huge improvements in infrastructure, transport, schools, hospitals, agriculture, mini hydroelectric plants, and as a result, today, in terms of I think we are about to achieve or have already achieved most of our MDG goals. Human Development Index is quite high. Per capita income is the 3rd highest in South Asia, soon to become the highest in a few years. And we have, I think, now in the 5-year plans, it's very important to note the role that was played by the monarchy. The role being played in the sense that, yes, there was money coming in, there was aid coming in, but I think the monarchy fortunately avoided the example in so many African and Asian countries where resources were ended up in Swiss banks and so on and so forth. So in Bhutan's case, the monarchy gave stable government, political stability, and used the funds honestly. Basically, it reached where it had to reach, and things progressed fast from there. One other major area of development I would like to come to is hydropower. I think as we sit in this room, 600 megawatts of power consumed by Delhi comes directly from Bhutan. And the recent blackouts in northern India, I think a significant amount of key installations got power from Bhutan as the blackout occurred. So I think in that sense, the Hydropower Corporation is a very important element for not only India and Bhutan, but also I think in the SAARC regional context, and gives us scope for regional cooperation in that front. Bhutan's total hydropower capacity is 30,000 megawatts, of which 23,760 megawatts as of now is economically viable. We've already built 1,400 megawatts in cooperation in India, and we are on the way to construct 10,000 more megawatts. Our domestic requirement is just below, I think, 200 to 300 megawatts. So whatever most of the projects we build, we end up exporting it. So I think the cooperation in terms of hydropower started from 1961 itself. But the 61 to 74 phase of hydropower was basically for Bhutan's own developmental needs, for own internal consumption. But from 74, we agreed on the first major project, which is Chuka, 336 megawatts, on 60% grant, 40% loan basis. And the second major project was agreed to in 96 and completed in 2006. This was India's largest ever foreign investment ever at the time, which is I think a project which had to be financed by India through grant of 60 and a loan of 40% to a tune of $1 billion. So the 1,020 megawatt project was completed, and it's a very successful model that shows how countries can cooperate and mutually benefit. In 2008, Bhutan had initially planned 5,000 megawatts, but I think with the political government coming in, it was up to 10,000 megawatts. So the understanding between India and Bhutan is that by 2020 we'll have 10,000 megawatts worth of projects completed in Bhutan. And of these, 4 are joint ventures where PSUs, public sector companies from both Bhutan and India, will have roundabout equal stakes, which is 2,100 megawatt of projects. The financing for most of these projects is 70 and 30, 70% loan and 30% grant. Now for Bhutan, the gain is that by 2020, we'll be earning around about 100 billion nultram, which is equivalent to the rupee, every year. This will make Bhutan completely economically self-sufficient, give us the highest per capita income rates in South Asia, and allow, because 15% of any project built has to go as free power to the domestic power consumption industry. So it will further enhance, further lower our electric bills, which are already quite low. And right now the government is carrying on a program called Electricity for All. By 2013 we will be achieving electricity for all villages in Bhutan, and a lot of socio-economic benefits. But how does India gain from this? India obviously gains in terms of in terms of electricity coming from Bhutan, which it needs for its growing economy. The other benefit also is, now you would wonder that this 336 megawatt, the first Chuka project completed in 97, you would wonder that India gave 60% grant, 40% soft loan. So how does India benefit? India is pumping in literally just for Chuka $500 million. So how does India benefit? So there was a study conducted by Duke University, USA, and Queen University in Canada by researchers from there, and they found that small correction here. In 1988, the Chuka project started production, but by 1997, which is round about 9 years later, India had recovered all its investment costs. And how was that possible? That was possible because, see, when you give a lot of financing for any project, you reduce the cost of project for a particular country. And in hydropower, when you calculate tariff rates, if the cost of financing is lower, the tariff rates also become a bit lower. So as a result, by 97, which is 9 years later, India had recovered all the costs. When you compare the low tariff to what if there was no Chuka project and India had to resort to thermal projects in Delhi or Bombay or wherever, the cost of those projects will be much higher. So economically, it's viable for India to build projects in Bhutan as well. The other factors being that in Bhutan we don't have as much red tape. The social and environmental impacts are much less because most of the projects are located in very deep gorges where there's minimal inhabitation because of the national geography of a country. And so it's a win-win situation basically at the end of the day. There are certain concerns where I think the Bhutanese private sector, which has a very low capacity right now, would like to get more involved. There are policies on the way to facilitate that. Now, in the SAARC region, I think this cooperation between Bhutan and India, or India and Bhutan in hydropower, is I think a blueprint for the SAARC region, because I think right now Bhutan is the only energy surplus or electricity surplus country in South Asia, and all of us I think need to cooperate in exploiting our potential. And as of now, India's peak demand in March 2012 was 130,000 megawatts, which is expected to increase to 283,000 megawatts by 2021. Bangladesh has a demand of 39,000 megawatts by 2030, but resources to generate electricity are very less. Nepal has a demand for 2,000 megawatts by 2020 and depends only on the 340 megawatts in the dry season and 600 megawatts in the wet season. Sri Lanka has a deficit of 1,868 megawatts, growing substantially. Maldives will have problems by 2015. So I think, there is a need for regional cooperation in electricity generation. The Asian Development Bank and the SAARC Regional Energy Trade Study both recommended that SAARC create a regional trade energy market with agreements between governments, infrastructure, and interstate cooperation. So that's with hydropower. Now I'll quickly come to our GNH economy. So Bhutan has been trying a unique experiment in terms of, and I think the former ambassador referred to it yesterday, gross national happiness. The GNH gross national happiness was first enunciated by the fourth king, His Majesty, the former king, Majesty Jigme Singye Wanchoo, in 1972. And it basically has 4 pillars: socio-economic development, good governance, preservation of culture, and preservation of environment. Now, I think this philosophy by itself is supported by the majority of the Bhutanese people. There's no doubt about it. But what has happened subsequently is that over-enthusiastic researchers and politicians have very highly complicated this philosophy. Now it has 9 domains to explain the 4 pillars. The 9 domains have 33 indicators of 172 sub-indicators. So you can imagine the complexity of this policy, and very few people can actually understand this now. especially the current ruling government has done a lot. I think has become a kind of a GNH fundamentalist government. They've applied GNH in every field possible. In some fields where you should not apply too much GNH as well. One major field is economy. We've completely become a GNH economy and we are suffering for it. For example, umbrella economic development policy is completely inspired by GNH, and it was released in 2010, and we said that we are going to be a services hub, we are going to be education hub, financial hub, tourism hub, so on and so forth, and we won't allow too many industries, we won't allow too many mines, and we are going to fast track green industries, but mines and industries will have to wait for case by case clearance. Then in the FDI policy was similar. FDI policy went to the extent of saying we will not allow McDonald's and fast food chains because they're bad for health, and so on and so forth. And we declared ourselves carbon neutral. Our industrial sector was completely shocked because you have to pollute to make money, but we declared ourselves carbon neutral by the government. No consultation with the private sector, and as a result, I think we are facing real problems. The umbrella GDP has totally flopped. We are not a hub of anything except for hydropower. Things have not taken off because instead of addressing deep structural problems with the economy, they applied a philosophy which is not in tune with the economy actually. So we are having a lot of problems, and there is a lot of unhappiness in the private sector in Bhutan over the policy. I think the government will get a reflection in the 2013 elections coming up. In terms of financial crisis, which partly is coming from this unrealistic economic model adopted by current leaders, is we are facing a rupee crisis and a credit crisis. And this just shows that we have not taken steps to strengthen the key weaknesses in our economy. Rupee crisis because ever since Bhutan's economic development started, because of a weak private sector, we've been importing more than exporting. To keep it very simple, we import more than we export. And as a result, and majority of imports are from India, as 75% or so, and similarly our exports are also to India. So as a result, you require rupees to import. But when you don't have enough export industries, you have a rupee crisis. So we've been facing a rupee crisis, and I'll just take a minute. In terms of rupee crisis, what's happened is banks have stopped giving loans. It has led to a credit crisis of sorts, and which has its own dynamics, and the Bhutanese private sector has come to a virtual halt. And this, I think, shows, as I said, structural weaknesses in the economy. We need to diversify in our exports. The government needs to focus on economic development instead of expounding GNH only, and we have to go beyond hydro and tourism. We have to diversify our industry, have more export industries, and remove economic barriers, and I think a whole change in the mindset. So I think, thank you very much.